Here are some different types of power. I'm only going to focus on a few of these, but I will explain what each of them is. So interpersonal relationships involve different types of power. The type of power probably we're most familiar with is legitimate power. This is when a person has a title. For instance, they're your boss, they're your supervisor, or I'm the instructor in the class. You know, a title given to someone that gives them power. That's legitimate power. But there's also referent power. Now, referent power is a type of power you have if someone is a person you respect and want to emulate, you would like to be like them, you respect them, you admire them, they then have referent power. Here's a question for you. Any of you who have had jobs or even volunteer assignments in the past, does the person with legitimate power always have referent power? Does a person with referent power sometimes not necessarily have legitimate power? Has there ever been someone you go to on the job that you go to because you admire how they do things and you want to do things like them? That would be a person with referent power. May or may not be the person with legitimate power. Reward power, someone who can reward you. Coercive power is someone who can punish you. Expert power, information, persuasive power, those are types of power that have to do with knowledge. But I'm really focusing here on legitimate, referent, basically, and also reward and coercive power. So let's look at a few pictures of people and see if we can determine what type of power they might have based on who they are or what the picture is, what we deem as their role in the picture. And we may or may not be able to guess. We can only guess. Some of you may know this guy. He is a boss. He has what type of power with the title of boss? Legitimate. And what other types of power might he have from that list? Well, with the legitimate title of boss, he probably has reward power. How about coercive? Probably with that legitimate title of boss. Now, how about referent power? Is he admired? Do people want to be like him? Well, we know from the show that he was on that people made fun of him. They really didn't admire him. It didn't give him too much respect. So although he had legitimate power, didn't necessarily have referent power. This picture looks like probably grandparents with a granddaughter, we can guess. In our culture, and here we're going to dip into culture just a bit, in our culture, American culture, and in most of our family cultures, do grandparents have legitimate power? I would say, generally speaking, a grandparent is someone to look to for perhaps reward and punishment. So that would be reward and coercive power. How about referent power? We hope so. We hope that that little girl wants to be like her grandparents, or at least admires them and respects them. This is a tough one. We really don't know. There's 3 people, random people. We really have no idea what types of power they hold over each other. Being friends, we might guess. We might guess that they have referent power to some extent. We don't really know from this picture. I just like this picture. It's actually taken from the 1930s, I believe, when the skyscrapers in New York were being built, and these are some steel workers on their break or on their lunch hour. If we want to take a stab at what kinds of power these people have over each other, we can't really tell if anyone's the boss legitimately or if anyone has referent power over anyone else. They certainly have coercive power over each other, wouldn't you guess? How might they have coercive power? Think about that one. Let's look at another principle of communication. Communication is ambiguous. And ambiguous means that basically it can mean more than one thing. Let's look at a couple of sentences that could be understood in different ways. Is your refrigerator running? Well, do we mean a motor running? Or do we mean the refrigerator sprouted legs and is physically running like you or I would? I know, that's a far out example, but that's really the simplest way to explain what this means. Words, communication, nonverbal as well, can be read different ways, understood different ways by different people. Jim fell off the wagon. And you want to know what this means as far as kind of a slang expression that we sometimes use? Well, when someone falls off the wagon, sometimes we mean they quit drinking, but now they're back drinking again, or they stopped practicing a habit, and now they're back in that habit again. So if I'm sitting with my friend in her driveway at her farm on a nice summer day, and she says Jim fell off the wagon, I might think, whoa, he fell off the wagon. Where was he? Did he hurt himself? On the other hand, if we're sitting in a bar and my friend says Jim fell off the wagon, I might think, whoa, he's drinking again. Oh, that's too bad. So communication can mean different things. Communication is punctuated. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but this is simply the fact that communication is continuous, but we tend to break it up into beginnings and endings to make life simpler. And finally, communication is inevitable. We can't avoid communicating. Because communication, we know, is more than speaking, right? A lot more than speaking. So if you come to class, first day of class, and you are determined not to communicate, you don't want to talk for whatever reason, you're sitting perfectly still, and your eyes are forward, you're not budging, you're not moving, you're not speaking, you're still communicating. I could assume different things from that. I might think, wow, he's so mesmerized by what we're talking about. Or I could think, he just doesn't want to speak today, maybe he's tired. Or I could think, whew, stoned out of his mind. I could perceive any number of things from that communication. Because even though you're trying not to communicate, it's inevitable that you do. Communication is irreversible. Once you say it, you can't take it back. Have you ever been sorry you said something, or did something, or treated someone in a certain way, or walked away from someone, or did approach someone, and you wish you hadn't? It's irreversible. You can't do it again. It's out there. And communication's unrepeatable. The situation will never happen again. We'll never be here on this date, in this room, wearing these clothes, this time in our life, this time in history, It's unrepeatable. So here are just a few things that the book talks about as far as competence. Now, let me ask you, think about what competence means. What does competence mean to you? Here's a cartoon. Let's assume these are two strangers standing next to each other at the bank. One of them turns to the other and says, "How much you putting in?" What makes that cartoon funny? Competence, let's assume that competence means knowledge and being able to use that knowledge. So, interpersonal competence is both effective and appropriate. What makes that cartoon funny is two strangers asking each other how much money, or one asking the other, "How much money are you putting in?" That's really not appropriate, and it's kind of funny that they're asking. The word mindfulness comes up in our book quite often, and really all mindfulness is the fact that thinking when we're in a situation, realizing that change is constant, people change, word meanings change, change is constant. And advice to be open to new information because things do change. First impressions need to be tentative, really, to really get the most out of the information you're receiving about people, events, the world. And just be mindful before you act. Politeness is also something that's brought up in the text. And I did like this quote from our textbook: "Politeness will not guarantee your interpersonal effectiveness, but impoliteness is likely to guarantee ineffectiveness." I mean, think about what you consider to be polite and what you expect and don't expect from other people. Just something to think about. Ethics is a topic that we could spend a whole semester on. But competence involves ethics, and this is really being mindful of how you're acting, uh, taking into consideration all of those four contexts. I like this quote: "If there's any great secret of success in life, it lies in the ability to put yourself in the other person's place and to see things from his point of view as well as your own." And that's something that we're going to be working on this semester in this course.